If you want to be a better illustrator, steal from photographers. You don't only have to take your inspiration from other illustrators. In fact, I recommend that you don't. You can make anything you want with an illustration. The only limit is your imagination. But photographers historically have had to work with a lot of limitations: technology, light, colors, and reality. But those restrictions act as a funnel for creativity. When you have certain boundaries to work in, you can really push those boundaries to their limit, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm James, an illustration agent, and I help illustrators build their careers. I don't often talk about the creative part of illustration because I'm just not qualified. You'll see some of my drawing skills later in the video, so stick around for that if nothing else. When I was a kid, I was playing with Lego or I was drawing. I still play with Lego sometimes. But I was drawing all the way through my childhood up to being 16 or 17. And as far as I can remember, I was drawing the same things over and over again: cars and superheroes. I was drawing for fun, with no real goal. I definitely wouldn't describe it as serious practice. I studied art at school, but I never really got good at drawing. Then once I got to college and started studying photography, that's when my creative education really started. It's when I got interested in art history and technique and theory. It's when I got interested in technology. When I started playing with cameras and I discovered Photoshop, I pretty much never picked up a pencil again. The cars were always from the side, the superheroes always from the front, standing still, boring static images with no real thought to composition. The composition of a photograph is so fundamental, it can make the image look balanced or unbalanced. It can draw the viewer's eye to the most important element in the image. It can add depth, and it can create tension and drama too. Looking at a static car from the side is a boring image. The only way that image looks interesting is if the design of the car is interesting. And if I draw that really well, it's not my creativity that's making the drawing look good. What I missed was thinking about what the composition of the whole scene should be. That's the car itself, the environment, the angle that we're looking at the scene from, and the scale of the elements in the scene. I learned the fundamentals of composition when I started taking photos. I'd never even considered it before that. Anyone can take a photo of a beautiful landscape, but not many people can take a beautiful photo of a boring landscape. One of the things that makes the difference is thinking about the composition. Here are some things you can try. Excuse my drawing skills, as I said, I'm a little bit rusty. Here's a top-down bird's eye view of a car in the center of the road. It uses symmetry. Here we've got a low angle, 3/4 view of the car. Not my best work, but this is a very common sort of angle in photos of cars and TV commercials because it's dynamic and it makes the car look cool and angry and sporty. This one's a high angle, symmetrical front view of the car, and we get this triangle shape emerging, which draws the eye in. You can think close up and focus on a specific feature of the car. This is the rear light, in case you can't tell. We get depth here from the foreground focus and whatever you choose to put in the background, or not put in the background. Or you could go for a wide angle shot. This car is on a winding road. It shows the full scene, which we might call an establishing shot, because it establishes where the car is, what it's doing and where it's going, or where it's coming from in this case. I've also roughly applied the rule of thirds composition here, where you split your canvas into 9 parts and you place the most important elements along these lines or where they intersect. You'll see this all over the place. You can also use leading lines, where everything in the perspective of the environment points towards the most important part. This car is in a tunnel, and thanks to my drawing skills, it's basically the same size as the tunnel itself. But you get the idea. Leading lines can be straight or they can be curved. There are all kinds of compositions you can try out, and some rules are made to be broken, but there are some tried and tested compositions that work really well. The rules are worth learning because they produce visually satisfying images every time, whether you work in landscape, portrait, or square. I've linked to an article below that has a pretty exhaustive list of composition ideas you could try out. Part of composition is framing. Where is the subject inside the frame of your illustration? Is it in the middle? Is it off to one side? Is it right at the bottom with lots of negative space? Which direction is your subject facing in the frame? If it's facing out of the frame, how does that change the narrative of the image? You can control where people look in your illustration by thinking about composition. Think about the shape of your frame too. Instagram has caused a lot of image makers to think literally inside the box and make images that work well as squares. But what if you're making something super wide or tall? What if you've got an unusual shape to fill? Landscape images encourage our eyes to move side to side, and vertical images make our eyes go up and down. You can also play with scale and use the whole frame or zoom out and make use of negative space. I can absolutely recommend a book called Read This If You Want to Take Great Photographs by Henry Carroll. It runs through a lot of these ideas and shows examples from famous master photographers. If you're liking this video so far, give me a thumbs up. It's been a fun one to make and reminisce about my time studying photography. Me and my friend Chloe used to go in the dark room at college at lunchtime when there was no one around and develop photographs. Another thing to consider is the lighting. Maybe you don't think of your illustration in terms of lighting because you can create light and dark at will, like a god. But this is a key skill for a photographer. If they're in the studio, they'll set up lights very intentionally. To create depth, they might put a light behind the subject. It separates the subject, the person, from the background and gives this halo effect and silhouette. To create a dramatic or moody scene, they could light the subject from the side, like 90 degrees on, so half the face is in darkness. Hard lighting gives you more contrast, it's dramatic. Soft lighting produces a more even look with less contrast. That's more common for like beauty photos or things you might see in a magazine. If you illustrate portraits, I encourage you to look up different photographic lighting setups because they will absolutely improve your illustrations. For example, the lighting I have in the studio here is a big diffused soft light source just off center of my face, which is fairly flattering, I hope. I have a light shining on a white wall here which reflects onto the side of my face, and I also have a colored light behind my head to separate me from the background. I knew this when I was making my older videos, but I was a bit more limited in the equipment I had, so it doesn't work quite so well. If a photographer is outside, they'll often aim to take photos in the golden hour, which is either after sunrise or just before sunset, when the sun is low in the sky and nice and soft with like an orange or pinky glow. It's very flattering light, and you can create beautiful silhouettes if the sun is behind your subject. And the shadows are longer at that time of day, which creates depth. If you take photos in the middle of the day when the sun is like high and really bright, it can often leave your photos looking a little bit flat and washed out because there's just too much light. An overcast, cloudy day is probably going to give you a more moody look because you'll get all those shadows from the clouds casting over the ground. You could also illustrate your scenes at twilight, which some people call the blue hour, because it will give your scenes a lot more blue hues, and the light will be very subdued and low contrast. And sometimes when movie makers want to film a nighttime scene, but either time or the budget is limited, they'll film it in the day and just light it up with blue lights or give it like a blue hue in post-production, and Bob's your uncle, it looks like moonlight. One of my favourite illustrators from when I was coming up also happens to be a wonderfully skilled photographer. Jasper Goodall takes a lot of photos at night, like in the pitch black dark, with some portable light sources to create these really moody and sometimes creepy nature photos with high contrast and a lot of silhouettes. You've got lighting from behind, but also light in front of the tree here. I'll put a link to Jasper's work below, it's really beautiful. But if you were illustrating a city scene at night, you'd get all these different coloured light sources from neon signs, traffic lights, car lights, etc. It's all artificial light. Natural light and artificial light are very different. They have different moods and they're different colours, which leads me on to learning colours. I don't have to tell you how to use colours. It's a pretty fundamental part of learning illustration or fine art or all kinds of creative subjects, but it can't help to review the basics. Complementary colours are at the opposite sides of the colour wheel. It can make the key elements pop in an illustration. Achromatic, that's without colour, is all shades of grey and black and white. Monochrome is a single colour. Whatever colour you choose will affect the mood of the image. Analogous colours are next to each other on the colour wheel. Yellow, red, orange and brown, for example. They work really well together. Colours also have temperatures. If you choose warm colours, it will give a very different impression than choosing cool colours for your illustration. If you're illustrating a portrait of someone with a dark skin colour, you might choose different background colours than you would for a person with a lighter skin tone to make them stand out. Colours have different weights too and can balance or unbalance an illustration. A bright, bold colour will overpower pastel colours, for example, which you could avoid, or you can see how you can make it work for you. It's not good or bad, it's just how you use it. There's much more to learn with colour theory, and I'm hardly an expert, but there are tried and tested rules and concepts that you can learn and use to make your illustrations better. If you want to add depth to your illustrations so you can draw the viewer's eye to the main subject of the image, you can think about the depth of field, which is a foundational photography skill, which is a kind of a functional limitation of camera lenses. You can see it in my video here. I'm in focus, but the background isn't, and if I put my hand up here, that's also blurry. So we're looking at what's in focus in an image. You'll have seen this in lots of photos and YouTube videos. This is what the portrait mode on your smartphone camera does. It adds a fake blurriness to the background to make the foreground stand out. Plan the foreground and the background to add depth. Whatever's in the foreground will affect what's in the middle and what's in the background. I'm not saying you need to add a fake blur, but you could make the background with some limited vague suggestions of shapes and have the main element, whether it's a portrait or a car or whatever, with crisp and clear details. Another functional thing with cameras is how you capture movement. If the shutter speed is very quick, the aperture in the lens will open and close very fast and freeze a moment in time. So photographers would use that for fast action like birds flying or sports. But a slower shutter speed, where the aperture is opening a little bit slower and letting more light in, is going to introduce a little bit of motion blur and show that movement in progress. I'll let you figure out how that can work with an illustration, but maybe it depends on what your subject is. Do you want to freeze the decisive moment or show the action unfolding? Photographers have to think about all kinds of limitations and then figure out ways to get around them. Things like the time of the day, weather, the equipment they'll need when they're planning a shoot. You can do all of this digitally on your computer or your iPad. You can still think about all this stuff, but it's a lot easier for you to make changes and construct these scenes and worlds yourself without relying on nature. If you want a sunset scene, add more pinks and oranges. If you want a night scene, add more blue. You can move your elements around on layers, that's side to side and forwards and backwards to create depth and the right composition. You can add things in or you can take them away to help the overall image. You can speed things up or you can slow them down. There's so much to learn and steal from photography and other art forms too. I don't know much about them, but I'm sure there's lots of great ideas and techniques you could discover and make use of. There's a link in the description that will get you a free month's membership to Skillshare. Take a look at some photography composition classes on there and see what you can steal for your illustrations. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, you'll probably also like this video where I show you how you can learn from other illustrators. It's a good one. See you next time.